difference, one cup at a time. Yeah, this is tea time. Yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, good afternoon. Miss Liz is back. That's right. We're back for the second show today. We were here this morning and we had an amazing guest this morning. We had Mary Kay Sorrells, and she shared about tigers love bubble baths, and it is a romance. So we're sticking with romance today. That's right. Romance Day with Miss Liz. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab your glass of wine, and let's really sit back and have some fun today. So before we get started, we're going to do the disclaimer and we're going to do a quick intro into the incredible Frank Wiegers. I hope I'm saying it right. I'll get Frank to correct me if it's wrong. But we're going to get in and we're going to be talking about sex today. So we're going to do a disclaimer so that if there's anyone out there that is underage, please have a supervision. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz is the live tea shows. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogue and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussion somewhere where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that the show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in this show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I will respect that and see you at a later show at a later date and time. And this year, all tea times are on Thursday unless it's a rescheduled tea time. So make sure Thursdays to tune in, and Thursdays we have 3 shows. We have morning, afternoon, and evening. So next, we have the incredible Frank Wiegers joining me. I'm not saying it right. I know I'm not. Our guest today brings in a very unusual background to the field of love and relationships. He's a fighter pilot veteran of the Vietnam War, where he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and 12 Air Medals. He came home completely disillusioned what was happening in that war and found himself in a relationship war that ended his marriage in divorce. This is a guy who's not only flew fighters, but he also raced sports cars and Formula 2 cars in Europe, skipped a winning yacht racing crew, taught stunt flying, and won the Amazon State Aerobics Championship. Talk about living on the edge. This man likes speed. The thing that was missing in his life was a fulfilling, loving relationship. So he turned his attention to learning everything he could about love, sex, and relationships. With degrees in business, Aero-Engineering, and law. He knew how to study. He sought out teachers from around the world, worked with a Native American shaman for over 15 years, and read everything he could find on love, sex, and relationship. He began working with men in the early 90s and in 2004 met his wife, Judith, herself a successful personal career and relationship counselor for over 40 years. Together, they have written two books. Their latest is the Magical Sex Book. Our guest is Frank Wiegers. He is here to tell you how you can put the magic into your relationship. So we're gonna get Frank into the studio, and we're gonna have some good old sex talk because we're gonna talk sex and we're gonna talk romance. We're gonna talk about all that good stuff. So welcome, Frank.
Well, thanks, Miss Liz. So nice to be here. I'm very excited.
It is an honor to have you here. And you really do love speed, like
Oh, yeah.
racing, yachts, flyers. And it's truly amazing. I've learned so much by doing some research on you. So let's get into talking the magical sex. Let's get right into it. If you'd like to share a little bit about the book and when you wrote it and how the people can get all that good stuff.
Oh, I'd love to share about that. As you mentioned in my intro, I was not a winner in relationships. I might have been a top gun in the Air Force, but not in relationship. And I really figured out that that was more important to me than almost anything. And I really wanted to know what it would take to have a fulfilling, loving relationship. So I started studying. And the more I studied, the more I found out I didn't know. And as years went by, I finally, after about 10 years of being by myself, I went to a ceremony one day, and that's where I met my wife, Judith. And we connected at that ceremony, went out on a date the following weekend, and that was 18 years ago. And so we've just been so happy and worked together so well that we both decided we needed to teach all the stuff that we had learned so that made our marriage work. So that's how the book came about. And we started out, we went to a workshop where the seminar leader called me up to the top of the front of the room. He said, tell people what you do. And I said, well, I coach people in love, sex, and relationship. He said, yeah, you and 5,000 other Tantra teachers. He said, tell everybody what you used to do. I said, well, I was a fighter pilot. So this lady in the audience says, oh, you're the top gun of love. And everybody went, ooh. And the teacher said, well, nobody's ever done that. Write a book about love, sex, and relationship in the vernacular of a fighter pilot. I went, well, who could do that? That sounds like fun. And I did it. And, it was that thick. And we looked at it, and we said, nobody's going to buy it. We couldn't even get an agent to think about it, much less look at it. So we start excerpting things out of there that we thought was the most important. And the first book came out was our book called So That's Why They Do That, Men, Women, and Their Hormones. And it talks about how hormones drive behavior differently in men and women. So with that going forward, we published that book back in 16, and it's available on Amazon. And then I said, the book I really want to write is about how sex is magic and how it creates the really powerful, energetic, spiritual glue that makes our relationship sing. And so she said yes. So she did most of the work on the hormone book, and I did most of the work on the sex book. But we both had major input into it, so it was a joint effort and an effort of love. So that's how it came about.
Well, and I got to meet your beautiful wife just before the show started, and the connection is really magical. You can see the love between the two of you, uh, and I think that's what we talked about just before we came live was connection, because that's what relationship is, right? Is the connection. So let's get into the connection. How did the connection start?
Well, it's really interesting. It's I had a teacher once. She said that the deepest wounds in our culture are sex and money, and she would always talk about money. And I said, well, who's going to talk about sex? And she said, not me. I said, okay, I'll do that one. So that's when the study started too. That was many, many years ago. So The thing in my research, I want to bring this out because it's really important to the connection, because everything that makes it magical is all about the connection. And there was a survey done of married couples, longtime married couples, and they asked the men and the women separately. And they asked the men, do you think your wife thinks you're a good lover? 85% of the men said, yeah, they thought they were good to great lovers. When they asked the women if they thought their husbands were good lovers, only 15% agreed with their husbands. So that tells us two important things. One is that the men don't know what they don't know. And two, the women aren't telling them the truth. And the reason they're not is because it's hard to talk about sex. When you start telling a guy he's not doing it right, man, you're just crushing his ego, and he gets hostile, shuts down, and doesn't hear another word that you're saying. Learning how to communicate about love and sex in your relationship is really a special skill, and it doesn't come naturally. We're not taught that.
Yeah. So why are we so scared to talk about sex?
Well, I think it's I have to say, I think it goes back to our conditioning. In school, we're taught all the things we have to learn to be successful in having a job and a career. We're not taught one darn thing about how to have a relationship, much less a sexual relationship. Sex education in school is all about how not to get pregnant and how not to get a sexually transmitted infection. So I mean, we're so lacking in that. I mean, there are many countries in Europe that have a much more advanced approach to love, sex, and relationship than we do. And I think a lot of it comes from our deeply Puritan culture. And it's not okay to have pleasure. It's only okay to suffer and do reparation for your sins. And God, that's just such a repressive. And of course, I was in a very religious family, and everything was repressed. So, I mean, it wasn't until in my late days that I really began to open up to the possibilities of having a really loving, pleasurable sexual relationship. So, um, learn. We can talk more about this. Learning how to have uh, a loving, compassionate conversation about sex is a special skill, and oftentimes I can talk about some pointers. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, let's get into the pointers.
Okay, so the first thing you have to do, let's talk about a woman talking to a man, and then we can talk about a man talking to a woman. But first of all, just getting a guy to have a conversation is a challenge in itself. And guys, you say, "How was your day?" Okay, it's fine. And instead of saying, I did this, I did that, and that's a whole nother ritual that we'll get into in a little bit. But the woman has to start out by telling him how much she loves him and how much she likes something that he does right. Not to bring up all the things that he doesn't do or does wrong, but start off with what he's doing that's right and gives her pleasure, and ask him how he feels about when he does that, and would he like to do more of that, and then get him to agree and acknowledge it and say, that feels so good for me, and you know what else would feel really good to me, and you get him say, and if he says, know what, that opens the door for you to tell him. And you have to tell him in a way that he can win, and not say, well, you don't ever do this and you don't ever do that. And boy, he's gone. He's not going to hear another thing. So you have to tell him all the things he's doing right. And he's like a little boy, guys. You know, we used to say, do you want to be a fighter pilot or do you want to grow up? And it's just the way we are. We're little boys till the day we die. Actually, I think that's how we are. And so, if you treat him like a little boy and offer him candy or rewards, then you're going to have a lot more success. So that's the beginning of it. There's a whole lot of other things that we do. I could probably talk about some rituals we do, which are also communication. You want to get into that?
Well, I think everything comes down to communication, right? It's how we communicate to each other, and that's how we connect. If we don't have that conversation, how can we connect? Correct?
Yeah, well, that's sex is a form of communication for sure. So the way and sex really starts way before you get in the bedroom. And there are some specific things you can do when you do get in the bedroom, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But the idea is starting to establish lines of communication. And there's three daily rituals that my wife and I do that that help us keep the communication lines open. Excuse me for a minute. The first one is our morning worship. Now, this sounds really weird, but we take a few minutes, usually at the breakfast table, to worship each other. And what I mean by that is I'll look at her and I'll tell her, I really love you. I love the way you work. I love your commitment to learning about your art. I love the way you teach your clients and work with your clients. And I love the way you take care of me. I love your titties. They're beautiful. And, just little things like that. And, um, and then she'll turn around and tell me, that she loves the way I keep things going around the house and how I communicate and take care of her and how the work I do to create uh, love and sex for people in my practice. And that takes maybe 30 seconds. And guess what? It gets really repetitive. I mean, we wind up saying almost the same thing every morning. And the idea isn't so much about the words that we're saying, it's about the fact that we're looking at each other, looking at each other's eyes, sometimes holding hands, sometimes not, and just declaring our love for each other. So that's ritual number one. Ritual number two is the evening news. And that's what we do at the dinner table. Well, how was your, and not, the answer is not fine. It was okay, or it was a lousy day. No, it's well, I first, and then I did this. I read the paper, and did you see the article about Ukraine? Did you see the article about that tax? Did you see what that guy, what that politician did or whatever? And so we'll discuss that thing. And the idea is not so much the content as the connection. The idea is that we're establishing a line of communication. And for guys, here's the thing that you have to learn, that when women are in conversation, they're in connection. And when they're in connection, they generate a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's what mothers have for their babies. You ever notice how women always stop to pet a dog or look at a cat or whatever? Because they can connect to that animal on a limbic level, which is below the level of consciousness, and that generates oxytocin on them. And you ever get together with four or five, or you ever watch four or five women together, and they're all talking at once and talking, and they come away, and they're like high. And the reason they're high is because not only do they generate oxytocin, up and dopamine and I don't know, a couple other, but it's a real chemical cocktail. So women love that. And so to really connect with a woman, you have to talk to her, and then you have to listen to her. And a lot of times you have to do a lot more listening than a lot more talking, but you don't just sit there and go, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, you say, oh, wait a minute. What was that you said? I don't, I want to know. You have to be there, present and engaged. And when you do that, you're generating oxytocin for her, and that's going to come back to you. Just a little side note on oxytocin for guys. I discovered a study that they did in Sweden, I think, that oxytocin goes down the brain and down the spinal column and comes out in the genital area. And there are 9 nerves that come into the genital area, and they all go to different places on different people. They're the standard ones that go to the women's clitoris, the head of the men's penis, those sort of things. But some of them go to other places. And guys, the thing is, every woman is different, and every man is different too, for that matter. But there are a lot of similarities. So the thing about the oxytocin in guys is when you get that flow going, it helps to stimulate your erection and make it last longer. So that's another important feature of oxytocin. So back to the rituals. Take a breath, Frank. You're going awful fast here.
Getting excited.
Oh, I just love this stuff. I could go on and on. I don't think an hour is going to be long enough. But anyhow, so the evening news was the third ritual, and then the last ritual we do is just before we turn the light out at night. We say um, three things that we like to, three things we appreciate, and it might be something that somebody did at work. It might be somebody that did something for us, or it might be something that our partner did. And then we say something that we liked about ourselves that day, something that we did that made us feel good about ourselves. We accomplished some task, or we met our schedule, we did whatever. And the last thing is something that we did for day. So it reminds us that we take time to have fun. So those are the three rituals, and all those will fold into step one in the four steps of magical sex. So does that? I think that pretty much covers
So,
the
so,
waterfront
so
of it.
and you've had some really good things because we need to have that open conversation. We need to have that communication and engagement. And I like that you've broken it up into three steps because that's exactly what T is, right? It's the three steps: the past, the present, and the future. And this is how we serve a strong T, right? Is because we get engaged and we take bits and pieces and we actually move along. So it's just like sex, right? It's the steps of three, but you have four steps. So why four steps, and what are the four steps?
Okay, well, it just kind of worked out that way as I was working through all the material that I had. But step two is foreplay. And everybody kind of knows what foreplay is, although we wrote a whole chapter on that plus a whole appendix on that. And step three is the play, which could be oral sex, regular sexual intercourse or whatever, but it's the act of sex that's going to lead to climax. And then the first step is pre-play. And people don't think about that, but that's the important thing that comes before foreplay. So the idea here is that you really need to set it up, and we talk about how to set it up in the chapter in the book, and then we go to the appendix and we give you a whole list of things that if you don't know what to do, you can do these things. I mean, one of them, for example, I don't know if I can, is I reach out and put my left hand on my partner's heart, and she puts her left hand on my partner's heart, and then I cover her hand with my hand, and so we're standing there face to face looking at each other, and then looking in each other's eyes. We don't have to say anything. We just hold that hand on heart, looking in eyes, and we get the love transferring. That's just one exercise. So that dinner and a movie could be pre-play, or just a walk in the park could be pre-play. The idea of pre-play is to establish the connection, because in our hormone book, so that's why they do that, men, women, and their hormones. We talk a lot about that because it's more than women's hormones; it's their brains, because their brains never really stop. They're just going all the time. They got one list after another list after another list, all the things they have to do, all the people they're worried about, you know, and men can just turn it off. Men can compartmentalize a lot easier than women. And so the idea of pre-play is to stop that. And the way you stop that usually is through touch. There's a whole series of touching exercises. Touch somebody, that helps them to get present in their body. And that's a very, very essential ingredient to having magical sex. And it's also an essential agreement to having that magical connection, that spirit energy that goes back and forth between the two of you. So that's step one. Step two, as I said, is foreplay. And it's, and I don't know, I go through the chapter and say, here's a list of things that you can do in foreplay. And I think it really would be helpful. I mean, in fact, I recommend this for couples, is to get the hard copy, or not the hard copy, the paperback copy of the book, and read it together in bed, and say, well, what about this? What do you think about that? And what do you think about this? And boy, is that a great way to cover all the bases and help you to understand each other more. So that's foreplay. And then the play, we talk about ways to have sex, and Most people, there's no right or wrong way. There just is having it,
Yeah.
And one of the things we talk about is the fact that we never have mutual orgasms. We're both, I mean, women. Well, it's important for guys to know that she comes first. I think Emily Nagoski wrote an amazing book, and it's called "She Comes First," I think. And or no, that was I'm getting off track here, but that's a really important factor. Is I make sure that she has her orgasm before I have my orgasm. So so then we're in the play. Then we go to after play, and this is a really misunderstood idea. Most guys say, "Here's two." We'll go back to the oxytocin thing. Excuse me. When women have an orgasm, men too, they're flooded with oxytocin. Men are also oxytocin, but also flooded with testosterone. And then the testosterone overrides the oxytocin. So instead of wanting to be there and cuddle, he's like, well, what's for dinner, or what's on TV, or he'll go to sleep, or he'll say, in the old days, he'll stop and light up a cigarette and have a drink or whatever. And so that it's really important to know that that period after you have orgasms has a lot of power in it, because look at all that spiritual connection you've both made, and look at all that sexual energy you both just generated. Well, we know that thoughts have, and we know that sex has energy because we just felt it. So if you combine the energy that you generate with sex with the energy of your thought, it's like putting rocket fuel on your thought. If you're both doing that having the same thought at the same time, both using all that sexual energy to thought, it puts it out there. It's like blasting it out to the universe, and you're more likely to manifest what it is you're thinking. And that's called sex magic. And that's been it's been taught by shamans for years. I mean, there are very early, I think there's early references to it in the Vedas, and I'm not a scholar of the Vedas, but those are teachings that predate the Torah. I mean, they're over 5,000 years old now, I think. So, excuse me, I got to clear my throat here. So that's kind of the four steps in a nutshell. We usually take about 15 or 20 minutes. We'll just Judith will put her head on my chest, and I'll put my arm around her, and we'll just lay there and feel each other's connection, and just bask in that glow of post-orgasmic feeling.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought this up, Frank, because a lot of people don't talk about the afterplay. There's the three steps, but the fourth step they always leave out. It's like you said, they go to sleep, or they light up a cigarette, or they watch a movie, or grab a magazine, or it's over. But that's also leading up to a second round of pleasure when we have the afterplay, correct?
Exactly. And it's just the idea of cherishing, the wonderful energy and connection that you've spent all this time generating.
Yeah, and I really like the spiritual connection, and I like the word magic because it should be magical. It should,
Mhm.
when you're sharing your body, it should be magical. You're not just sharing your body with everyone, you're sharing it with somebody that you're actually connected with.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially for couples that've been in relationship for a long time, you kind of get stale, and it's just like the same old. And excuse me a minute. So you have to think of ways. It's not about doing things different so much, or creating a new position or a new venue or whatever thing. It's about creating the connection, and that's the thing. If you can create that connection, and you can do it on all levels, it will just take your relationship to a much higher level. I mean, it'll just make life better for both of you and empower you, and you get that sexual energy, and that goes forward through the day, and you take that into your work. You find yourself being more creative. I studied with a Native American shaman for many years, and he he said, sex is not just about procreation, not just about making babies. Sex is about creation. It's about creativity. And I find that, the more I let the power of Eros, which is that sexual energy, into my life, the more creative and the more excited and enthusiastic I am. So that's the way I feel about it. So
So we have a comment coming in. I want to share it with you, Frank, and get your feedback on it. So it says, even magical when it's a warm day and you and your partner have place to yourself and lie there connecting bodies without even having sex. That's my view.
absolutely. I mean, it's not necessarily about the in and out, so to speak, of having sex. It's about the connection. And if you can get that connection with your partner, then you have it any way you want it. But there's no right or wrong to this. It's what's great is how deep can you go with your connection. So, yeah, sure, I think that's fine.
And one thing we don't really talk about in the schools and in the public is intimacy, right? Is we don't talk about that deep intimacy of connecting with one another's souls. So how do you feel about that, Frank?
Oh, absolutely. I like to say it's into me you see. And that's what guys don't realize. All heroes in our literature are like the loners, Jack Reacher, Maverick. All those guys. They're just just do it myself. I'm the only guy that can do this. It doesn't work that way in relationships. What works in relationship is to connect to your partner, and when you need help from your partner, you ask for it. So intimacy is letting your partner know, and it's about being vulnerable. And a lot of guys think that if they let their partner know that they're worried about their job, or they're worried about not being able to perform on the basketball court, or whatever they're doing, that their wife is going to think less of them. And actually, I think if they can acknowledge that they're feeling a little vulnerable, or they're feeling a little anxious about something going on at work, and the wife can come in and say, "Oh, honey, you're so good at that. You're going to be all right," and get in the love. Women love that. I mean, nature it's nature and nurture with them is just almost automatic. So when you open yourself up and share your vulnerability, and share your feelings of maybe not feeling great, that a lot of times what she says can help you out. So that's a big step for guys, and doing that generates intimacy and makes her love you even more.
Well, it brings that deeper understanding as well, right? Because then the man doesn't feel like he has to put this tough wall on, because women don't want that tough guy, when it comes to connecting. We want to have that openness and that softness and the touching and the feeling. And I believe that's where we disconnect, right? As men and women disconnect because we feel that our partner wants us to be this tough person, but we actually want the opposite. And women are bad at that and doing that. I'm a woman, so I'm gonna fend for the women. Like we suck at telling our men what we really want, and we just feed them, and then they feel that they are pleasuring us. Like you said in the beginning of the show, is 85% of the men thought that their women were pleasured, and 15% of women said no. So us as women, we need to step up and be better women as well and start expressing.
Yeah, and here's the thing: guys don't realize that women can read faces. Men hardly ever. I mean, she'll she'll be angry, and he'll say, "What's the matter, honey?" She said, "Nothing," and because he didn't see when last week when he said something that really hurt her feelings, and her face went to that hurt place, and he didn't notice it. And so he's going on for a week wondering why he's getting a cold shoulder because he doesn't read her face like she does. That's another way, and we talk a lot about that in our hormone book. And so guys have to realize that they don't read faces, but women do. So women, when you see that face on him, when you know he's suffering, and he'll say, and you say, "What's wrong, honey?" And he'll say, "No," and you saying, "What aren't you telling me?" You just keep after him until he fesses up, and maybe he doesn't want to fess up because he's doing something that he ought not to be doing. And that's another thing. If a guy is doing something he ought not to be doing, that's a withheld communication. And anytime that you have a withheld communication from your partner, you are creating separation. And you have to acknowledge if you've made a mistake, say, you know, I did something that I know you're not going to like it, but I got to get it off my chest. And let's see if we can. I'm sorry if I hurt you and whatever. But anything can be self-love if you're open and willing to cooperate. So I think that's an important thing.
Well, connection, the communication needs to stay open. Whether it's, good or bad communication, we need to have that communication in order to understand each other, in order to heal and fix each other. If we don't know, how can we fix?
That's right. And you can't heal it if you feel it. So
Right?
that's, yeah, really good. So I
So,
don't know.
Frank, I want to get into your tea. If I ask you what tea you're serving me today, what are you going to give me?
If you ask me what my tea is,
Yeah, what is your tea? So, what three words would you give me for your tea?
training, training. I would say that, training yourself, you don't get the training to be a good lover or a good partner or an intimate partner anywhere else. So you have to find, you can see that wall of books behind me. All those books are about love, sex, and not all of them, but most of them are about love, sex, and relationship. And that's not counting the 1,500 books I got in my digital library. So I read about this, study it constantly. I never quit studying. That's part of what keeps me going. I'm going to be 88 in March, or I mean in
Oh,
May.
wow.
And so that's what keeps me, and keeps me excited about learning about life and love and telling others what I've learned. So I forget, where were we going with this?
We're going with our tea. We're spilling some tea. We're going to give some really good,
Training.
strong tea here.
Yes.
So, you gave me training for tea. What are you giving me for E?
E is, well, more like training, maybe education and learning everything that you can about love, sex, and relationship, and talking to your partner about what you've learned. And our book, the Magical Six book, I had to toot the horn here, is a great way to do that. If like I said, get the paperback. It's, I don't know, it's not that expensive, and it will pay huge dividends for you.
And what are you giving me for an A?
Application.
Ooh.
You have to apply all the stuff you've learned and trained in. And that's the other thing. When we call our business Top Gun Love, because of that story I told you about, and because Top Gun pilots will work and study and practice as much as they can to keep their art and their skills polished. What if we did that for love, sex, and relationship? Wow. Would that change the world or what? So the idea is to to be able to study and practice. And yeah, I like the idea of practice. There's a couple aspects to practice. One is you do it because you want to get better at something, and the other is you do it because it's fun. Like practicing guitar or practicing a golf swing or piano, whatever. You do it sometimes just because it's fun. You can go out there. It's a game. It's not competition. You're just doing it because it feels good. And and so that's two aspects of practice. The other one is like a spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, all those things are spiritual practice. The other is that you take that and consider your relationship a spiritual practice. I mean, both Judith and I both have that concept that and even in the churches they call it a sacrament. So it is a spiritual commitment. And I remember, I think we were on our third date, and Judith said, I want to make sure that I'm looking for a husband. And I said, well, I'm looking for a long-term committed relationship. She said, I'm looking for a husband. I went, okay, that's a long-term spiritual relationship. So I said, let's commit to each other right now and see how deep we can go, how fast we can go. And I'll bet you in 90 days, we'll know whether it's going to work or not. And if you don't make that commitment, that's the other thing is it's the commitment to make the relationship work. And if you don't make the commitment, then there's always sort of a, well, it wasn't going to work anyhow. So I'll bail out now. And there's no bailing out. It's a commitment here, and
You're either
we
committed or
have
you're gone.
our yeah, but it's not easy, because we're both very strong-willed people, and we both have our ideas of how things should be, and it's led to some very uncomfortable times. But we go through that, and sometimes we resolve it, and sometimes we don't, and sometimes we say, "Oh God, we're arguing about that again," but it just never goes away. It's always going to be there. So you just take that and say, "Well, this is what I got," and then I celebrate what I got, and I have to. I do that in my meditation every morning. Sometimes I think, I just got to breathe in love and forgiveness and breathe out anger and resentment. That's let go of that stuff and just accept for what it is what you get, and I own it and I cherish it, all the warts and all, and it gets better.
Well, you said something that I did. What you just said, Frank, is we're arguing about that again. Just because you have a magical sex life doesn't mean you don't have arguments, right? In a
That's
relationship.
right. That's right. Somebody wrote one of the books I read, and that all relationships go through cycles of harmony, disharmony, and repair. And the idea is when you recognize you're in disharmony, how quickly can you get into repair? And that's what it's all about. And that's going to happen, and as the relationship matures, as I said, I think we met in 2004. So what is that? 19 years ago. And it has gotten better. I mean, the periods of disharmony are lesser and lesser and shorter. But we still have them. We still have to go through that and find out how to repair. And most of it maybe requires us to take space and separate. I mean, just physically go for a walk, or my favorite thing was go get ice cream or something like that. Just to chill out and let that. Here's another thing I learned in the hormone book, that when guys get angry, excuse me, it stimulates the anger receptors in the brain, which triggers testosterone. And then the testosterone goes back down to our gut, and that makes us stimulated more, and it goes back up to our aggression center in our brain and makes us angrier. It goes back down and goes back up. And after about the third cycle of that, I'm enraged. And I'm just like, "Wah," I'm so mad, I just can't stand it. And when I'm enraged, there's no talking to me. There's no fixing me. There's no sense in arguing. I can't hear it. I'm enraged. So the only thing I can do is go away. Usually I eat sugar and it grounds me, and then I get cooled off and I'm out of rage. And then I go, what the heck was that about? Why was I, because there's something inside me from, my childhood existence or whatever that got triggered.
Yeah.
And and when that gets triggered, I'm out of present time and I'm not able to resolve anything. Then on the woman's side, what happens for her is she gets angry and she gets flooded with cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and the angrier she gets, the more flooded with cortisol is. And she's in this argument with him or me or whatever, and we finally resolve it, but she's still flooded with cortisol and she can't shut up. She can't stop. She just keeps going. Guys, the only thing you can do is walk away until she can find a way to let that cortisol flush out of her body. And she can't do it either. She's not in present time. She's in her form of rage. So those are important things to know when you're in a relationship, and know that they're going to happen. And you have to know that's the repair section. Sometimes what you have to do is just take space, time out, whatever. So
So
that's
does this bring it to makeup sex? How does
yeah, it
makeup
does.
sex come in?
Oh, it does. And It's hot because now you've got all that energy flowing in your body, the adrenaline's flowing and everything, and boy, it's wild and crazy. And that's the best time to create, because the more passionate you can make your sex, the more powerful it is, the more sexual energy, and the more you can attach that to your thoughts and create. So sometimes it's not easy to remember that, and we have a little trigger word that we use after orgasm to remind each other, because we don't orgasm at the same time.
But the heat is hotter when you're angry, right? When you're frustrated. And for that moment, you kind of just disassociate from what's actually the argument about, right? Because you're right back into connecting with the bodies.
Right. But you're not, it's more than your body. You're connected to the psyche as well.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So a lot of people, when we talk about makeup sex, a lot of people will use that as, okay, I was mad at you, let's just have sex, let's just forget it and let's get over it. And us as women, I know for myself, I'm just like, okay, that was good, but this still needs to get a solution. Like, we need to figure this out, right?
Absolutely. Yes, you do. You still have to resolve the issue from one way or the other. And until you come to an agreement, it might not be what either of you specifically want. And, and that's okay. You say, it's still compromise, a compromise in relationship. And guys especially don't realize that. It's my way. I'm the guy. You do what I say. Well, come on, guys.
We're both here, man and woman. We're both saying women step up, men step up. I think it's the connection. We really need to start understanding connection. And like you said right at the beginning of the show, is when we were in school, we were not taught how to have or trained how to have relationships with each other.
Well, yeah, I think, as I said, I think that really the corporate interest, I think our country's run by corporate profits. I mean, if it doesn't bring corporate profits, it doesn't matter to anybody that's got any money. So corporate profits do not encourage um, loving relationships. They would rather have you in the office, in the plant, in whatever, working, than at home having a good time with your partner. And we work until we get time for a vacation, and we go for a vacation, and then we slow down enough for all that bad stuff to come out, and then we fight, and we have a fight on our vacation, and that's ruined. So there's nothing to do. I want to get back to the job. At least I know what I'm doing there. So, I mean, it's just it's not a good, and so I think we're not trained in it, and the only way you get the training is to seek it out. And I've talked to many times, if you want to have a really fulfilling, loving relationship, you have to create it every day. Every day, find a way to create the relationship and celebrate Eros. Eros is sexual energy. It's the life force that drives us. It's the source of creation. We came from sex. I mean, we all started with a sexual act, so with an orgasm, and hopefully a double orgasm. So anyhow, the idea is that we have to train ourselves to learn about relationships and learn about love and learn about sex so that we can have pleasure. It's not, I mean, having a good job and doing what you love and creating what you love, that's great. And taking a relationship, you have to have a balance in there. You can't just be all about work. You can't just be all about relationship. You have to have a life of everything. It's all inclusive. Does that make sense?
No, that does. And I like that you say that we come from sexual energy, because that's how we are conceived as individuals.
Mhm.
They had to have that sexual connection in order to conceive us.
Right.
So why are we so scared of that sexual connection as we rebirth ourselves? Like, as we become human beings, we're right automatically that shy person that doesn't want to talk about sex. And I want to talk about sex. I want to understand sex. I want to be educated about sex. And I think you've really brought a good point when you were sharing your tea, Frank, is that you're the training, the education, the application, and that's part of sex, right? The application of, yeah, dressing to perform, wearing sexy lingerie, getting the lubes, getting, the vibrators, the toys, getting all of that. So we're getting the application prepared in order to practice it.
I did Judith and I did a podcast with a friend of ours about a month ago, and we were talking about that. It's very common for partners to have different sexual appetites, and sometimes, usually, it's the man wants sex more than the woman, but not always. A lot of times, it's the woman that wants sex, and the guy's too busy working. He's too tired, burned out. He comes home at 8 o'clock after working, maybe 12 hours, and she wants sex, and he goes, God, honey, I'm just wasted, and he can't do it. So you have to find ways around that. That's another thing that the corporate profits run our lives. It's just, I hate it. So, not to say that corporate profits are bad, and we need corporations and we need them to succeed, but not at the expense of our lives and creating war again.
Yeah.
So where was I going? Oh, what? Give me a second here. So I'm thinking that you have to create it, and you have to think about how you can help each other and ask each other often, what could I be doing that's going to support you in what you're doing? And you make a relationship about each other and taking care of each other. So, um, where were we going with that, Liz? I kind of got
Well, we
lost.
were talking about the application of practice, right? The practice of
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah.
The
So
toys, the lubes, the vibrate, because not everyone is into that. Not everyone that's not a sexual attraction for them, because some might use vibrators and others might say, what, that's not my cup of tea at all. I don't want that. Like, I want you, I don't want the toy. you
yeah,
know
exactly.
and you said that right at the beginning of the show, Frank, was we all have our own sexual pleasures and practices that we all enjoy. So if you hear your friend saying, oh, I like my toy, and the other one's like, oh, I don't know about those toys, it's because we're both different individual. Like, we both have our own likes and pleasures in life.
That's great, and I remember the thread I wanted to complete, and that is that we're responsible for our own sexual fulfillment. Our partners, it's not our partner's job to fulfill us; it's our job to make sure. And I usually tell this to guys too. I said, if you're not getting, you can't push your partner into having sex. I mean, um, charity is not magical sex for sure. So you don't want a mercy sex. What you want is to have a great sexual experience, and if that means doing it for yourself, then do it for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that, and it takes the burden off let's say for me with a woman. If I want sex and she's not into it and not ready for it, then I'll go close my office door and take care of myself and do what I need to do to relieve that pressure that's driving me crazy. And women can do the same thing. And women, God, I love I think, I'm trying to remember the name of the woman that wrote, I think it's Becoming Clitorate or The Clitoral Truth. I don't know, one of those two books. But women, I think somewhere around 85% of women do not orgasm in in penis and vagina sex. They only orgasm from clitoral stimulation. So guys have to know that. And that's why it's really important to know how to manually or orally stimulate the woman's clitoris so that she does have an orgasm. And then you can have penis and vagina sex and you can have your orgasm, or she could do oral sex or manual sex on you. However, it doesn't matter. It's the idea that you're both giving each other pleasure. So it's really important to know that. And for guys, if you're feeling like you have to have it and she's not willing, then take care of yourself. For God's sake, you did it for years in high school. You
Right.
did, you did it in college, and women the same way. If you think you really want it and he's too burnt out, working too hard, you want to do something to try and get him not to have to work so hard. But take care of yourself. Just do what you need to do. I think that's really important.
Well, I think, Frank, it comes back to those numbers, 85% and that 18%. you know? Was that the women not saying that getting they were having their orgasm without the intercourse, where the man thought it was the intercourse that was giving them the pleasure. And maybe this is where we need to understand and be educated more, is that the women don't have an orgasm during intercourse, you know?
Right. And guys are, and so women think that they have to fake it to make sure the guys think that they're doing their job right. Well, those days are over, buddy. You got to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and that doesn't have penis and vagina intercourse. That's a good thing, and that's where babies come from. And and in the hormone book to the for premenopausal women, they for a guy needs to really understand how a woman's cycle. Well, a woman needs to understand as well how her cycle works and when she's most likely to be horny, if you will, which is at the middle of her cycle when she's in estrus, I think it's called, and she's most likely to get pregnant at that time. And so many women are on various forms of birth control today that some of them don't even have periods anymore. I don't know. I'm too old to be with it, but my clients tell me about it. Um, so you have to know and understand what's going on there, and the idea of being worked to death is really something important. If the job is, you ever listen to a band called the Eagles?
Yes.
Okay, there's a great song called "Take It to the Limit."
Oh, yes, that's a good song.
There's a I love that song. There's a line in there that says, "You spend all your time making money, and you spend all your love making time." Well, doesn't that really describe what we got going here?
Yeah.
We spend all of our love because we're so busy trying to make money that we don't have time for the love. Well, then he says, if it all fell apart tomorrow, will you still be mine? And then he says, I'm searching for my freedom, but I can't find the door, and nobody seems to care. So put me on a highway and show me the sign and take it to the limit one more time. So that's kind of like where we are.
And you just brought up a good fact: music and sex. Make out with music. The beat of the music and the connection. Because when
You
we
know,
connect with the music, we connect with the bodies as well.
that's one of the things we do, excuse me, as part of pre-play is we dance. And we spend about 5 minutes dancing to something that really rocks out. We're both around jumping and thrusting with our hips and wiggling our butts and flopping around our genitals and whatever. And so we do that, and then after 5 minutes of fast dance, we do about 5 minutes of slow dance where we're really holding. We're more just rocking back and forth. We're not doing the waltz or uh, the Lindy or any of the ballroom. It's not ballroom dancing. It's just standing up and being our naked bodies are connected to each other. And we do all this stuff. Once we start with pre-play, we have our clothes off, standing there naked and vulnerable and open to each other. So I think for me, I used to listen to music while I was making love, and I found that kind of maybe got in the way of my connection. So
Oh,
I stopped listening to music. I do the music during foreplay, but then there was another, somebody made a CD that I kind of liked, that came from a tantric community. And I don't know if your folk, do you know about tantra? Do you know anything about tantra?
no.
Okay, tantra, Tantra, tantra is an ancient form of sexual spirituality, came out of a yogic practice. There's Buddhist tantra and Hindu tantra, and now we have in the U.S. or most of the Western culture, we call it neo tantra or new tantra. And the idea is, I think, a Sanskrit word that means a weaving, and it's the idea of weaving sexual energy into your daily life so that it kind of pervades all of it. And When I met Judith, we were both at a tantric ceremony, and she was a student of tantra, as was I, and we still are. And it's the idea that we both use as consecrating our lovemaking, because tantra recognizes the spiritual aspect of making love.
Mhm.
So so that's a big, and so we studied that, and we use a lot of breathing techniques and touching, ways of touching each other and exercising. And there are some exercises in using, identifying the energy points in the body. I think they're called chakras. Well, they are. And I don't know, you may have heard of that. There's,
Yep.
start down at the base and go up to the crown. And so there, it's a way of having that sexual energy. So then when we get to, this is really good. I'm glad you brought that up. When, when, um, when a guy, for example, when we get to the edge almost to orgasm, and we call that edging, and then stop and allow the energy to subside a little bit, and then go back up, and maybe do that 4 or 5 times before going to a full orgasm. And in doing that, I found that I could bring the sexual energy down from my genitals all the way up my spinal column, around my head, down through my thing. And then I would touch the tip of my tongue to the roof of my mouth and let that sexual energy come back down to my heart. And then let that love energy go from my heart to her heart. And we do that sometimes when we're making love and I'm connected, penis inside of her vagina, kissing mouth to mouth. And we have a whole energy circuit then that goes from my mouth, her sexual energy coming in, comes down my spinal column, up my penis into her vagina, up her spinal column, and out her mouth and back into me. And we can stay connected like that for a long time, and just not moving much at all, just being connected and exchanging that energy. And that's really getting into the spiritual realm. And it's just, it's like staying in a blissful state for
Well, and this
half
is
hour.
why I'm not rushing our conversation, Frank, is because I want people to understand that we're not here to rush sex. We're not here to just get it wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and get the sex education out there. I really want my viewers and audience to know that some things need to take the time. We need to slow down. We need to enjoy. We need to have the pleasure. And yes, we are going over the hour because I want Frank to get into a lot of these details because we don't speak of these things. We don't understand these things. So how do we better our sex lives if we don't know? We need the
Well,
awareness.
well, that's the whole thing, and it's really true. It was certainly true for me, is I didn't know what I didn't know. And the only way to do it is to make a concerted effort and find a way, find books, find teachers, find coaches, find people that can help you. Don't try to, don't be like Jack Reacher. Don't do it all just get help. And there are love coaches, relationship coaches everywhere, and have websites, and you can look at their website and say, I identify with that person, and then you reach out to them and say, what do you charge for a coaching session, and what do I, how can we connect, and what do we do? I do almost all my coaching by phone or by Skype, or more often by Zoom. So um, and I love this platform that you're on too. It's really great. And so that's the whole idea, is you have to make an effort. This isn't going to happen unless you make it happen. And you have to take responsibility for educating yourself, as I did. I mean, nobody, I didn't know where to go. And I would talk to everybody I came to. I went to 12 meetings, and I talked, I have to say that, 44 years ago, I got sober in AA. And it was, talk about a spiritual awakening. It was definitely a spiritual awakening for me. Haven't had a drink or a drug since. And now I wouldn't even think of taking something that's going to alter my consciousness, that I work so hard to be conscious and present in the moment, no matter what. And and I want to keep it that way. So I learned then that I had to take responsibility for myself and educate myself. And I'm not afraid to study. I'll do it. And I think learning is a good thing. And I do a lot of things. So that's
Well,
kind of what I,
you're making some really good points, Frank, is because you and your wife are both relationship coaches, and you're still doing the research, you're still getting the training, you're still practicing, you're still putting the work into the application of the relationship. And I think as women and men, for all the audience and listeners that will watch the replay, it's okay to ask for help in your relationship, and it might even make your relationship stronger, by reaching out and saying, you know what, I don't know all the answers, I don't know what pleases you, and I don't know how to get you to express yourself. So let's get a coach, and maybe that coach can get you to open up. Because us as women too, we're like, oh, if we tell them that, they're gonna think we're dirty, we like it dirty, we like it where a coach can actually make us, help us, lead us into a better sexual relationship with our partners as well, correct?
yes, absolutely. And a lot of times the idea of having a coach for couples is that oftentimes the coach needs to act free. He's going to say, "Wait a minute, you can't talk until he's finished talking." And actually, Judith and I use a process. I don't know. I learned from one of my teachers that we call it conscious listening. And basically, what we do is if we're having a debate and we want to resolve an issue and we fight about it, we say, "Time out. I want to have a conscious listening about this tomorrow or this evening or whatever." We don't want to do it in the moment. You can't do this while one of you is angry or upset.
Yeah.
It won't work because, as I said, when you're angry and upset, you're not in present time and you're not going to solve anything. So when you're both, clear minded and ready, then we sit down face to face across the table or just one chair to another, but at each other, and we have those little timers, the kitchen timers. Then we set it for 15 minutes, and I'll say, when you said this, I felt I was really hurt that you said this, and I stopped, excuse me, and then she says, "I heard you say that you were really hurt when I said A, B, and C." I said, "Yes, and when you said A, B, and C, I thought that was completely wrong, and I think it's X, Y, and Z." And she say, "I heard you say that you think ABC is wrong and X, Y, and Z is right." And then we go on like that. She repeats what I say, pretty much verbatim, but not, I mean, as long as she gets the gist of what she's saying. And if she doesn't get it, she said, "I heard you say that ABC is right, but I think it's FY or LMNO." And I say, "Not LMNO, it's X, Y, and Z." And we keep going back and forth until we got a clear communication. And ding, the 15-minute buzzer goes off, and then it's her turn. And she said, "I hate it when you do ya da da da." And I say, "I understand you. You hate it when I do da 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 da." And then I repeat back everything that she says. And we go back and forth like that, and it could take an hour. And that's, you know, but at the end of it, we say, "Okay, well, I understand what you said. I don't like it, but I understand it and I can live with it." So that's kind of the way it resolves. And she'll maybe say something like that too. I heard what you said. I understand it, but I don't like it, but I can live with it. And we compromise or do whatever. But we both understand that we're coming from a place of love. And I love her, she loves me. And this is not worth the relationship. It's just a harmony disharmony repair issue, and we use this conscious listening process as a repair. Focus listening, I think we call it. Does that make
Well,
sense?
no, that does make sense. And I think we need to do more of that, right? But I think it comes back to the connection, communication. When we're having a disagreement, it's usually broken discommunication. And that's what you're saying, like XYZ. And I think it's ABC. And then, and like you said, it might take an hour for me to actually understand that it is XYZ, not ABC, you know? But I think it's that broken disconnection of communication.
Yeah, we might find out that it's really AXM.
right?
It's not ABC. It's
It's
not
not
X, Y,
even
Z. It's,
neither one of us was right, you know.
yeah.
But
So
having that communication, you actually find solution, and I
yeah,
think that's what it's all about. Is and
absolutely.
magical sex is actually about a solution of understanding one another.
It's about magical relationship is really what it is, and that's what it takes to have magical sex.
So, Frank, any final words? We're going to wrap up your tea time. How can people get your book? Where can they find you if they'd like to have you on their podcast or
Well,
radio station or all of that good stuff?
I think you mentioned it. My website is called is www.topgunlove, all one word, .com. And I do coaching, but I'm not really looking for more clients. But if somebody has an issue and they want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to work with them. The phone number and the email is all on the website, so you can find it there. Both of our books, the Magical Sex book, and so that's why they do that, are both on Amazon, and you can get them there.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to. I love to, as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff.
And we need this again, communication and understanding. We need the education. If we don't research and get the proper education out there, how can we understand what magical sex is?
Yes,
So I really want to thank you, Frank, for joining me today on Tea Time. It was an honor having you here. I learned so much. My paper and pen are like full, full, full. I got notes here, notes there. Yes, I am the pen and paper girl. So I really want to thank you. It was an honor to get to know. And let's stay in touch because I might have some questions that I might want to reach out to you and Judith about. Um, and I want to get everyone that tuned in today. Thank you. Yes, you did send me some questions, and I think we answered those questions along the way during our conversation. So I didn't throw them out there, but I think by the conversation that me and Frank had together, those questions were answered. So if they weren't answered, please send them to me, and I can send them directly to Frank, and Frank can help you with that.
I'd
Um,
love to. Yes,
and again, I want to thank all the viewers and listeners and supporters of Tea Time with Miss Liz. We are doing a third show at 7 p.m. with a returning guest from last season. DC Gomez is joining us because she has 2 new books out. So we'll be talking about that and talking about all of the good updates that she has since she's been on last year. I believe she was on in the fall. So it's been a couple of months since I've seen DC. So I'm really excited about that. But again, Frank, thank you for joining me today. Don't
thanks.
leave. I'm just going to close up the live and we'll continue talking in the back. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And thank you again for all your support. And if you'd like to know more about Miss Liz's Tea Times, check out my website, www.misslizsteatimes.com, or check out the YouTube channel and give these Tea Times a listen to on your own time. And who knows, sit with a loved one, sit with your spouse, and get to know a little bit about the Magical Sex book and get yourself a copy. So I'll see everyone tonight at 7 p.m. for the third and final show of the day.